Whitney Young was the man who my high school was named after. And it was named after him for a very specific reason. So my school is basically in downtown Chicago. My high school was basically in downtown Chicago. But in the riots that followed Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968, that portion of the city was actually burned down as people were expressing their anger and lighting buildings on fire and causing just general destruction. It wasn't until 1975 that my school was built and opened. So there was a period of 5 to 6 years in which that area was basically left totally destroyed. And it, as I understand it, the people in Chicago, the education leaders there in the city at the time, chose to name the school building after Whitney Young because this was going to be a school that welcomed children from all across the city of Chicago. And that's where my message of positivity comes from you all. Whitney Young, as we saw in that first video, certainly was criticized based on the positions that he took and based on the way that he chose to lead the movement. But the message that I take from his story is that there's a role for everyone to play in social movements. And that includes you, that includes young people, that includes people who might have different experiences, people who may have been marginalized for various reasons. So while there were people like Martin Luther King who were coming from a background steeped in the church, or people like Malcolm X who were coming from more impoverished backgrounds and who had done jail time, people like Stokely Carmichael who were young students at the time, and Diane Nash, there also needed to be people like Whitney Young who had a more corporate background, who were pushing for more corporate jobs for Black Americans. And so when we think about any successful movement, it's important that we're coming at it from all of these different angles and that we're collaborating, that we're working with one another, we're holding each other accountable, we're thinking about ways that we can help each other strategize and improve our strategies. So that's what I want you all to think about this week. How can you collaborate with people who might have slightly different opinions than yours and slightly different experiences than yours? And how can you also be a part of something, be a part of a movement, despite or regardless of what your specific background is? Because we need to come at it from all these different perspectives. Young people like yourselves are super, super important. You all have the potential to be leaders in these movements, and you should exercise that leadership. You should be ready and willing to step up and share your experiences and fight for things that you want, including in the school building at West Mac. All right. That being said, let me go to the next slide.
Don't get Black Power by chanting it.
Today is the 5th day of our 3rd unit, and we will discuss the importance of genetic diversity in this lesson. We've got the same objective that we've had for the last couple of days because there were only 2 standards that we needed to cover in this unit. But our essential question is different today. The essential question asks, why is it important that individuals of the same species have a certain amount of genetic diversity? So on this slide, you should at least be writing down the title and the date, as well as the fact that it is Unit 3, Day 5. But I also encourage you, like I believe it was Abraham last week, or was it Chandler, or was it Fralin? Someone last week reminded us of the importance of writing down the essential question. And that importance it serves as our guiding light. When you get to the end of the lesson, you can ask yourself, can I answer this question? If the answer is yes, then you've taken what you were supposed to take from that lesson. If the answer is no, then unfortunately, you maybe missed some important information, and you might need to reach out to Mr. Rudd. You might need to reach out to a classmate and say, hey, did you get this portion of the lesson? Or can we spend a little bit more time going over this? I didn't fully understand it. So this essential question is basically your benchmark. It allows you to say, yes, I've learned this. No, I need a little bit more attention paid to it. Okay. So we're going to do some quick mitosis and meiosis review. Last week, we introduced these two concepts of mitosis and meiosis. They are both different forms of cellular reproduction. They're both different types of cell division. Mitosis, I like to remember it because of the IT. And the IT, for me, stands for identical twins. So mitosis produces cells that are exact copies of one another. They are identical twins. Meiosis, on the other hand, I like to think about the E and the S as standing for egg and sperm. So meiosis produces the cells that we need for sexual reproduction. We also did some quick review last week with this Venn diagram, and I asked you all to write this in your notes previously. But I'm going to just quickly flip through this, and I added something in the middle in the both column. Both mitosis and meiosis can only happen after interphase. So I'll leave this up for you all to take a picture. Like I said, we went through this last week, and you all were able to help me place these different terms in their respective bubbles. But if you were not here last week, or if you missed some of these terms, you weren't able to write them down, go ahead and take a screenshot of it now or take a picture. I really do encourage you all to get as many graphic organizers as possible. A Venn diagram is an excellent way of representing information in a more visual way. This way you can start to, when you're studying, you can start to actually see the notes as they appear. Uh-oh. Okay. All right, and now we're going to do another form of review. We're going to play this quick quizzes. I just sent the link to the chat, or you can go to joinmyquiz.com and enter the game code 789164. 789164. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Breon and Monet and Chandler. That's 4 people, but we've got, let's see, 16 students in the call today, 16 students. So we should have 16 students in this quiz. Thank you, Fraylin. We're going to take about 60 seconds to get as many folks here as possible. 60 seconds. Thank you, Kadaria. Thank you, Alex. So we still need 9 students. We still need 9 students. Brianna and Jason and Monet. Oh no, Monet's there. Sade, Kathy, Abraham, Rudy. Oops. Oh my gosh. Oh, I didn't close it out for you guys. Let's see. Ten more seconds to join this game if you haven't already. There's the code again. I'll send the link one more time. Of course, if you're unable to join before we start, you can join while the game is in progress. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, of course, guys, I want to see that accuracy up near 70%. There are 15 questions here. 15 questions. Good job. Let's keep that accuracy up as we answer more and more questions. I'd love to see it remain near 70%. Good job. Can we keep pushing and get up closer to 70%? Looks like we're about halfway through in terms of the numbers of questions we've had answered. Chandler is out to a good lead, but Brianna and Rudy are not far behind. So as you guys begin to finish up, let's see if we can keep pushing that accuracy up closer to 70%. 70% is where we want to be. Good job, Rudy. Alex has a 3-question streak. Okay, we've got some back and forth at the top here. Rudy and Chandler going at it. Looks like Chandler has answered at least one more question than Rudy. Come on, Chandler, finish strong. Get this last one right. Okay, and there's Rudy jumping in first place. He's up by a little over 1,000 points. Okay, so it looks like our top 5. Fraylin might be able to jump into a first place position. Kadaria just finished. We've got 7 out of 13 people done. Let's take about 2 more minutes to wrap up, guys. But we did a good job. I want to push that accuracy up. For those of you still working, 65 is not bad, but I'd like to stay around 70%. I think that'll put us in a good position to move forward as we approach our exam on Wednesday. So those of you still testing, still working on this quiz, let's see if we can get that accuracy up on behalf of the whole class. Fraylin's going to finish probably in the top 3. Good job, Fraylin. Excellent job, Rudy, Chandler, and Brianna. We'll go over some of these questions as we get a few more people finishing. Okay, let's see. Cool. I cannot tell how many people are done. Let's take a look at some of the questions we struggled with. I know we can't really look and see what's happening because a few people are still working. But question number 1. In mitosis, the two resulting cells are different from the starting cell and identical to each other, different from the starting cell and different from each other, identical to the starting cell and different from each other, or identical to the starting cell and identical to each other. We've got 4 people who answered that correctly. Can one of you reveal yourself and let us know how did you know that was the correct answer? And we just had another person answer it correctly. So how did you know, someone who answered this question correctly, how did you know what the correct answer was?
Which question are we on?
We're looking at number 1 here. So hopefully you can still see my screen.
I think it's the third one. See?
So identical to the starting cell and different from each other. Now, remember what I just talked about is that I like to think about mitosis. I like to remember it because of the IT in mitosis. And the IT stands for identical twins. So here, the answer is that they are identical not only to the starting cell, but they are also identical to each other. They are exact copies of each other. All right, so this, I guess we can call it D. The answer choice that's at the bottom would actually be the best answer here. Number 2, we struggled with this one as well. Only 3 people got this right. Number 2 said fruit fly body cells have 8 chromosomes. After mitosis, you would expect the resulting fruit fly daughter cell to have how many chromosomes? 16, 46, 8, or 4? So one of the 3 of you who got this right, can you explain how you knew you got, or how you knew what the correct answer was? I wish I could.
I don't remember if it was right or wrong.
So what are your thoughts about it, Brianna?
I don't really, I guess I was confused. Looking at the picture, I was confused. But I think I chose 8. But I think that's wrong.
8 is correct in this case. So you you should be confident in your answer. You got it correct. So mitosis is a process that produces diploid cells. That means that they have the full set of chromosomes. And again, mitosis, as we know, produces identical twins. And not only are they identical to one another, but they are also identical to the parent cell. So if the parent cell has 8 chromosomes, that means that the daughter cells also have 8 chromosomes because they're diploids, but they're also identical to the parent cell. Now, meiosis is a little bit different, but this question didn't ask about meiosis. It asked specifically about mitosis. We did struggle with some of the other questions as well. It looks like everybody is, well, some people, I'm going to end the game. That way we can kind of see some more stats. But congratulations to Brianna, who came in 3rd, Chandler in 2nd, and Rudy in 1st. Good job to all 3 of you, as well as to those of you who did finish this at least. Rudy, you did really well. You only missed, looks like, 1 question, so that's excellent. Or maybe 2. Let's keep scrolling over. Yeah, 2. What else do I want to highlight here? Let's take a look at these questions. Okay. So we did on average very well, guys. I'm pleased with where we are. I do want to look at one question that 6 of us got incorrect. It says, after meiosis is complete, the new cells are blank. So meiosis produces cells that are totally different from one another. Every egg cell and every sperm cell that is produced after meiosis is different. Every egg cell and every sperm cell is genetically unique. All right, so that goes back to the Venn diagram that we were just talking about. Let's go back to the slide. So this Venn diagram here, please, if you have not already written it down, you should at least take a picture of it so that you can go back and write it down later on. This really explains the similarities and differences between these 2 concepts, and we definitely need to be clear on those similarities and differences. I also wanted to take this time to highlight that one of your fellow classmates did schedule a tutoring appointment with me. So that's excellent. I really want to encourage all of you to take advantage of that opportunity. It is there for a reason. I look forward to talking with you all one-on-one. So if you think that you are not fully understanding these concepts, and they're hard concepts, guys, they don't come to us easily, or they don't come to us right away. But if you think you need a little bit more time with these concepts, please don't hesitate to schedule an appointment with me, I just sent the link to the chat, and there you'll be able to find time to get on calendars. All right. So we've got a few notes to take today, but we only have an exit ticket. So I'm going to take some more time during this asynchronous time to lecture a little bit. We did already define this term, genetic variation, on Friday. But genetic variation is a measure of the variation that exists in the genetic makeup of individuals within a population. That's a mouthful, but we'll talk more about what exactly it means. But as we can see here with these images of different species reproducing, all populations of sexually reproducing organisms have some amount of genetic variation. What this means is that every organism that sexually reproduces is going to produce an organism that is genetically unique. There are no two human beings that are exactly alike. In the history of human beings, there have been no two that are exactly alike. There will always be some amount of genetic variation. So I want you guys to think about it. Why is it important that there is genetic variation within a species? Why is it important that we are not all clones of our parents? Okay, yeah, if we were all clones of each other, Monet tells us that we would look the same. So that might be just kind of aesthetically boring. If we all looked the exact same, there wouldn't really be any concept of beauty or ugliness. It would just be kind of boring. So that's one reason. What else? What's another reason why it's important that we have some genetic variation?
Like to make like produce babies or whatever. Like it's not, I don't know how to say, it's not good or healthy for like the baby to all have the same, chromosomes or whatever, because then the baby will like have all these like different effects when it grows up.
Wonderful, yeah. So that's one of the best responses that I can remember. When a child when a child is produced from individuals who are too genetically similar, for example, from siblings or first cousins, you end up with that child is likely to develop some type of problems because they're coming from a gene pool that is too similar. Okay, so it would be not good for the survival of the organism if they are not genetically different, if they're not coming from two genetically different individuals. So thank you for pointing that out, Brianna. But you're on the right track there. Genetic variation is really what allows natural selection, which we'll talk a lot more about later in the course, to pass on beneficial genes and to diminish harmful genes. So the genes that are good, the genes that contribute to survival, those get passed on. And the genes that are harmful, because of this genetic variation, they probably will not be passed on for very long, maybe just for a few generations, if at all. This is advantageous as some individuals are able to adapt to the environment in order to increase their chances of survival and reproduction. All right, so let's watch this quick video.
The theory of evolution was developed by Charles
Skip forward a
Darwin
little bit.
and published in his book, Condition Number 1, Individuals Within a Population Differ. There are features that differ within populations of the same animal. In our case, the feature that varies between our giraffes is neck length. Some giraffes were born with long necks, some were born with short necks. Condition number 2. The differences are, at least in part, passed from parents to offspring. Darwin's descent with modification is the idea that offspring are fairly similar to their parents, with some genetic differences. Condition number 3. Some individuals are more successful at surviving and reproducing than others. In the case of our giraffes, the long neck individual did not acquire its neck by stretching to grab the leaves. Instead, individuals within the population were born with a neck length that was longer than others. Because the longer neck allowed them to reach the food that was otherwise unattainable, it gave them an advantage. Condition number 4. The successful individuals succeed because of variant traits they have inherited and will pass on to their offspring. Giraffes with the longer neck advantage are in better health and able to pass this feature to their offspring. Because this trait is more successful than shorter necks, more individuals in the population have it. Over time, this process can result in populations that specialize for particular environments and may eventually result in emergence of new species. In other words, natural selection is an important process, though not the only process, by which evolution takes place within a population of organisms. Let's review. Individuals within a population differ. The difference is the theory of evolution.
Okay, so what we just saw there is that clearly there are differences that just arise as a factor of the fact that we are sexually reproducing organisms. Animals and plants reproduce sexually, and fungi. So just by nature of that process, you end up with different traits. Some of those traits will end up being a good thing. In the case of giraffes, the trait that ended up being a good thing was the long neck. Those traits that are good things, meaning they're beneficial, meaning they're advantageous, the genes that code for those traits get passed on. And eventually, you end up with the population having totally different traits. All right, on Friday, we talked about 5 causes of genetic variation. So now I want you guys to recall those 5 causes. What was the first one that we talked about? The most important source of genetic variation. What was it called? Good, mutations. Yeah. We talked about mutations, several different types of mutations, and we'll talk about more of them in the coming units. But this is essentially what mutations look like. We're altering the genetic code. We're altering one of those bases. So an A or a T or a C or a G, we alter it and then it ends up affecting the overall genetic code. What was the second source of genetic variation called? Thank you for that answer too, Rudy. What was the second one that we talked about called? Hopefully you all have notes you can refer to for these answers. Okay, the second one was called crossing over. Crossing over is the exchange of some genetic material during meiosis, during prophase 1 of meiosis. So in this image, we can see how some of the blue chromosome gets switched over to the red chromosome. Some of the red chromosome gets switched over to the blue. That's called crossing over, and it increases the genetic variation. A third type that we discussed was independent assortment, and independent assortment gives rise to different chromosome combinations. So because genes are not linked to one another, just because you inherit the gene from your dad for dark hair color does not mean that you're going to inherit the gene from your dad's straight hair. You might get it from your mom, or you might get some combination of the two. Genes are not necessarily linked. So this gives all these different combinations that can arise as a result of meiosis. The fourth source of genetic variation we discussed was non-disjunction. Non-disjunction is a failure of the chromosomes or the chromatids to separate properly, leading to daughter cells that either have too much genetic information or they have too little. As we can see here, this daughter cell has too much genetic information. This one has too little. And the last source of genetic variation we discussed was fertilization. We kind of all know what that means. So if you weren't here Friday, or if you don't have notes from Friday, please make sure that you have these 5 sources written down. And the video from Friday's lesson is available on YouTube. All right, I'm skipping these videos. So the human life cycle looks a little bit like this. Of course, we start off with those gametes, the sperm and the egg cells. They are haploids. Once the sperm penetrates the egg and fertilization happens, we now no longer have a unique sperm and a unique egg cell. What we have is called a zygote. A zygote is that very first cell that will eventually develop into a fully grown human child. So for the first 4 weeks of the human life cycle, that developing organism is referred to as a zygote. And the cells are basically just growing and dividing. They're just undergoing a lot of mitosis, but now they are diploid cells, and they will remain diploid cells throughout the rest of the development. At about week 5, and for the 4 weeks after that until week 9, the organism is referred to as an embryo. It's still, quite small. Its essential organs are beginning to develop, but it certainly is not viable by itself. It couldn't live without its mother. At about week 10, the organism is referred to as a fetus. And this is when it's basically growing and developing. The essential organs are all there, or at least they should be. And the organism is going to start to develop secondary organs. It will start to develop limbs. And its essential organs will also develop to be a bit more sophisticated. And then around week 40, the typical gestation period for human beings is about 40 weeks. Typically, we hear it being 9 months, but it's closer to 10 months, really, all when everything is said and done. So about 40 weeks. That's when the baby is born. So again, we start off with fertilization. The egg fertilizes, I'm sorry, the sperm fertilizes the egg, creates a zygote. We're going to talk about this process of cell specialization a little bit later on. But then we become an embryo. Cells continue to divide through this process of mitosis to create an adult human being. Through this process of meiosis, we create gametes, and then the process starts over again. So this is really a cycle. So go ahead and write down this cycle in your notes, human life cycle. And here it is essentially represented in a different way. This is a great image to take a picture of, a screenshot of. All right. So now we do have an exit ticket, folks. We've only got 10 minutes left. That should be plenty of time to knock out the exit ticket. Today is the 8th, so day 5. So I will be here. I'll leave you guys on mute to knock out this exit ticket. Okay, folks, it's now 11:36, so you all are good to go ahead and start enjoying your lunch break. I appreciate you working hard today, and I look forward to talking to you all tomorrow.